In the last lecture, we set up the ability to share the content within our application via Twitter. Now we've got all this set up, we're ready to move on to the second sharing option out of 3 within our application, and that is the ability to share via emailing. Now we're going to be setting this up and kind of creating it just like how we did with the Twitter function, how we have a separate view load up within the application ready to share. So this gives us a way of not going to another application, like coming out of our app and then, for example, going to the emailing app. It gives all the capabilities and functionality and keeps them directly within the application itself. So we're going to be sharing directly via email in this lecture. And how we do this, again, is very similar to how we did the Twitter one. It requires a certain framework to, again, reference, because the framework has all the capabilities that we need to actually perform this task. So before we go any further then, the first thing we're going to do is jump into our main.storyboard. And we need to grab our share email button and create an action for it. So I'm going to bring up the assistant editor. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. We can see where we previously added in our share to Twitter function here. And we're going to simply right click or control click and drag our share email button all the way down below. And I simply call this one share email. And making sure that is as a connection as an action, and then connect that up. So now we've got this new function, this new action that's now linked to that button. We can then go on to code it to enable us to share the content that we have directly to friends or family via email. So let's close the assistant editor and go back to the standard editor. So like I mentioned before then, it's kind of similar to how we share with Twitter. We have to rely on a certain framework, meaning we have to import one. So go to our project name at the top, and make sure that we selected on the build phases, as you can see where we did in our previous lecture of importing our social framework. We're going to press the little plus symbol, and all we're going to type in now is message, and we're going to add in the message UI framework. Make sure you don't add in the messages, just the message UI one, and add that in. So there we go. We've imported our second framework within our project. So all that's left to do is import it into the class we want it to be used in, which is going to be our endViewController.Swift. So simply scroll to the top, and it's pretty much repeating the same process as we did to the social framework. We can simply import our message UI framework. So that's basically telling this class that it's aware of it. We're also not only doing that, but importing it so we can then reference all the capabilities it has to perform the task of sharing the content via email. So once we got that in there, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to space out our newly created action that we've now got, so we can then clearly see what we're typing on the screen. So again, now what we're going to be doing, like I said before, is quite similar to how we've set up our sharing to Twitter function. It's not the same way we do it, but the method is pretty much the exact same. We first need to detect if the ability to send mail is an option within our application. And you may be wondering, is this kind of like how we did with Twitter, like checking if an email account is already logged in? Kind of yes and kind of no. We're not really checking for if an email account is kind of signed in. We're actually checking for if the device can actually send this email. Now, you may be thinking, but doesn't all iPhones and iPads have the ability to mail and stuff like that? Yes and no. If you're creating on stuff like an older device, or for example on the simulator, we don't have that method. Older devices, maybe running on older iOSs, depending on how you create your application, may not have this, and kind of thinking all the way back to maybe one of the first iPads that don't have these mailing abilities. But we need to make sure we take care of this. As a developer, we need to cover all aspects of when we code our applications. So what we need to do then is check if the ability to send mail is an option within the application. If it is, then brilliant. Go ahead and do what we want to do with sharing the score via email. Else, if it's not, then we're going to do what we set up within our Twitter. We're going to simply say within a simple alert, please either log into your email account or check your settings, one or the other. So how we detect it then, again, is with an if statement. So we first see is if, and we're going to kind of call up now our mail compose view controller. So we type in our mf mail compose view controller. There we go. Which is going to be the view that loads up over our application, ready to populate it with all the information. And we just need to first, again, like I said, detect if it can send mail. Now, if it can, what it's going to do is perform the action we place within this bracket. Now, in here, we're going to create, like we did with our Twitter one, We're going to create our mail compose view controller kind of view that loads up, and then we're going to populate it with all the information that we want. Now this is a lot different from the Twitter one, as all we did was populate it with a certain piece of text. When we send an email, we have stuff like the recipients, the subject line, the message body, so there's 3 fields that we need to populate. So let's start from the very beginning and let's create a let, and let's just simply call it, make sure it's all lowercase there. Let's just simply call it mail, so we can then reference that at any point and link that to our mf mail compose view controller. And we need to make sure that this equals our mf mail compose view controller again, and we add in our 2 brackets at the end. So now when we reference this throughout our application, all the attributes that we can now edit are linked again to emailing. So we're going to first call upon our first one then, and this is going to be it for our dot. And we're going to set this to our mail compose delegate to equal self. This is so we'll be able to interact with it and have the ability for it to load up on the screen. And we call upon our mail again. Now this is going to be the first field that we get to edit again within the sheet. So we do mail dot, and we're going to simply set to recipients. Now recipients is who we're sending this email to. Now, unless you're quite psychic and you can predict who you want your kind of users to send email to, then pretty much you can type in any email address you want within a string or an array. Now, we don't really know who they want to do, so what we want to basically happen is to allow our users to manually select an email address they want to send it to. So we're just going to type in nil, meaning that we're going to add nothing into that field. It's going to be completely left blank. So we move on to our next field, which is to then set the subject of the email. So we could do something simple like maybe type in like the application name, or check this out, or I bet you can't beat me, something like that. Do you know, that would be a pretty cool thing to add in. So I bet you can't beat me. That could be the subject line of the email. It's quite clickbaity if you kind of think of it in that sense. But that's going to be like, again, the header of the email that appears in, again, the recipient's email box. Now, the bit that we want to focus on the most is the actual body message of the email itself. So we type in mail and we do dot set message body. And again, this works exactly the same to how we added in the text for our Twitter. Pretty much going to be the exact same thing. So we're going to do our 2 quotation marks now, and inside of it we can simply type in, again, the exact same. My final score was colon, and then we need to import the text that's coming from our label. And how we did this before is our backslash and 2 brackets, and then place the label from within inside of it. So we type in our score label dot text, and we have to make sure that we put an exclamation on there because it's converting the data and transferring it over into another string. Just, you know, makes the whole process a lot easier. So is HTML, we're going to simply select this to false. We don't want to mess around with anything to do with that, and end that with a bracket. So that's pretty much got all now set up our mail view that's going to load up within the application. All that's left to do now is then present it to our user. So we do self again as we call up the own application, and we're going to be presenting a view to the user. And the view we're going to be presenting is mail to what we created. Animated is going to be true, again, creates a nice faded in effect. Completion, we're going to leave at nil and end that with a bracket. And there we go, that's pretty much all we need to do there. Now you may be seeing now that we still have this warning or this error within our mail compose delegate for the self. And it's because we need to add in one more function which allows us to read another function statement. And we'll get onto that in just a second. So what we need to do is scroll all the way to the top. And where we've imported our UI message framework here, and we've got our UI view controller here, just after that we need to add in the delegate itself. So we do a comma and we type in mf mail compose view controller delegate. That's all we need to type in there. That allows us then to link up the delegate to itself. You now see that warning is now gone. Now, unlike Twitter, no matter what we do, whether we press the post, tweet or cancel button, it's always going to dismiss that view from the screen once we've finished using it. And the reason we're setting up the delegate is because we need to link to a new function statement where we have to dismiss the email view. Again, no matter what happens, if we choose to send the email or we cancel it, we need to manually dismiss the view from the screen. So now we set up the delegate, and just after this whole function that we created, we're going to create one brand new function statement altogether. And we type in our mail compose controller, and we need the one that has the did finishing with results, which is the first one that appears. And what this basically allows us to do, whatever result happens within the application, we can perform certain actions upon it. And the only action that we actually really want is the ability to dismiss it from the view once we've finished using it. So the same way in how we would dismiss the actual view controllers within our application when we restart the game, it's a pretty simple standard method. So we do self.dismiss animated, we're going to select to true because it will give that nice fade away effect, and completion we're going to set to nil. Now again, because we added in a delegate, we've linked it to itself, no matter what happens, it's always going to be reading this function. And again, this only triggers when did finish with a result. So again, whatever happens, whether we send it or cancel the email or if it crashes, again, it's always going to dismiss it from the view, so our user will always remain within the application. So now we're going to go test it out, we're going to build and run it. But the problem we're going to have is that we're unable to kind of test it on a simulator. We don't have the capability to send email on the simulator. So what we're going to be doing now is I'm going to build and run it to my device and then mirror my screen so you can see it, and we're going to test it out and see exactly how it works. So now, as you can see, my screen is now being mirrored, and we haven't ran or built this application on a device or on my device before, so I'm going to get, as always, 0 score because I haven't played it yet. So this gives me the chance then to play again and test it on a real device. So let's actually give myself a challenge. Let's see how many times I can tap, because it is a little bit easier now to do this on a real device than the simulator. And let's see what kind of score can I get. Can I get over 100? Oh, not quite. So I got 95. So once I've now got my score, which is now going to be saved to the application, I can then go on to share via email. And once I press it, we get that nice animated effect come in, where we got the recipients 2, there is no one there. We got the subject, I bet I can't beat you. Is that what I put in? I can't beat you? Yeah. I bet you can't beat me. There we go, that's me misreading it. With the subject line, and then the actual message body, my final score was 95, because again, that's the score I've been given. So for me to actually send this email, all I need to do is type in and add in my own recipient, or I can choose to cancel it, and if I do, I'm going to delete the draft. It dismisses and goes straight back to our application. Perfect, exactly what I want it to do. Now this works and was all made possible because, again, it detected that it can send mail. Now what happens if it can't send mail? For example, in the simulator or anything like that, or the ability is not there within our user's device? All we simply do is create an else statement. And what we're going to do is simply set up an alert. So an alert will appear if the possibility for sending mail is not available. And again, it's the exact same process we created when we set up the alert for our Twitter button. So we create our alert and we simply call it alert, and we equal that to our UI alert controller, and that's going to have its own title, message, and preferred style. So in the title, what we're going to simply say now is accounts and message. Please log into your email account, and the preferred style, again, pretty much the same to what we've done. UI alert controller style, which is just there, dot, and it's going to be an alert because we talked about this before. We can have 2 different variations of an alert: the alert that we're using and something else called an action sheet. So then we're going to get the alert which we referenced from our constant up above, and then we do dot add action, and the action that we're simply going to add is going to be a UI alert action, and we link this up to its very own title, and we just simply say on this OK style. Again, we keep it nice, basic, and simple with our UI alert action style, which is just there. Dot default, and the handler we then add nil and have a bracket. Then we do self dot present it to our user. And what we're presenting is our alert. Animated, we select to true. Completion, we select to nil. So again, we've talked about this in greater detail from what we did in our previous lecture when we come to set up our alert. And again, pretty much the same as what happened when we did set it up, that I missed off the bracket at the very end. That's always one I'm always missing, so make sure we got that bracket selected on the end there, and we're pretty much all good to go. So what I'm going to do now then is build and run it on the simulator, and because again I'm not logged into an email account on the simulator, we're then going to be returned with that alert. So we're testing it on a real device that has the capabilities to do it. So something that doesn't have the capabilities or is not logged in again to an actual email account, we're not going to be greeted with the email view. What we're going to be greeted with is the alert instead. So we just wait for this now to all finish, and we go back to our end game view. So we got a score of 9, share via email, I get the alert that the ability to do it is not there. And what I've just noticed as well is I've misspelled your, there we go. So pretty much we're all set up now with the ability to share the content via email. We've covered Twitter, email. In the next lecture, we're going to cover the final ability to share the content via SMS messaging.